Hey everyone, it's Robin Riley for Bello's Designs. Welcome to my video tutorial, Let's Make a Vintage Card. Today I'm going to show you how to create a fun card topper that will have a very vintage look and feel to it. Before we get started with the supplies, let me invite you to join us in our Facebook groups. We have two of them. There's the Del Bello's Design Lounge, and in that lounge, we specifically want to see all of the Lavinia products displayed. We have a lot of creative people in our group, and they do wonderful jobs with their creations. So make sure you join that page. The other page that we have is called the Del Bello's Design a la carte. And now on that page, we showcase all of the other types of materials and stamps that Patty carries in her store. And again, join us there and display your beautiful creations. We are on other social media platforms such as Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. And you can find us there by searching the hashtag Del Bello's Designs. Okay, let's get started with the supplies that will be needed to create this vintage looking card. First of all, I am going to be using a piece of craft paper, and the craft paper measures 4.5 inches by 6 inches. This is approximately a 65-pound weight card. It's very thin, it's very flimsy, but being that it's a topper, it'll work just fine. You will also need a piece from an old book. Now, this is a piece that I pulled out of an old dictionary. I think you can figure that out by looking at it because of that line that's going down the middle. And since I am using a dictionary, I do try to find a page that has some nice, positive, uplifting words on it. Cheer, cheerful, cherish, charm, charmer, charming. That's just me trying to coordinate my cards somewhat. Okay, don't worry about the size of this because as you can see, it's going to be torn. The stamps that we'll be using today in this card, these are the dragon pods, probably one of the very first flowers I ever bought and still one of my most favorite. When deciding to make this, if you do not have the dragon pods, you want to find something that has an open area, like this is what I'm referring to, this open area, so that you can add some color in there. We don't want a silhouette on this particular card, not in this area anyway. That's the Dragon Pods again, LAV 374. The other stamps that you will need will be the Fairy Foragers, if you care to, and that is LAV 498. The Fairy Foragers come in a set of 4, but I only chose 2 of them to use on this card. And lastly, the sentiment that I'm using is called Magic Surrounds Us, which is LAV 669. And the main reason I chose this is because the font matches the font on my dictionary page as close as possible. I didn't want to use a cursive looking background font with the print. But if that's something that doesn't bother you, go for it. It's just kind of, that's my thing and the way I try to coordinate my cards. Some of the other products that you are going to be needing will be some ink. For all of the black stamping, I used VersaFine Claire Nocturne. To make the distressed aged look to this card, I'll be using Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo, along with a blending brush. I will be using some watercolor markers. Now, believe me, this is a cheap set that I bought a long time ago, so any watercolor marker would work well, and I really think any type of colored marker would actually work. And I wanted to use orange shades, so I chose a darker one and a lighter one. I will also be using a jelly roll pen, which is clear and contains a little bit of glitter just to add some interest on and around those flowers. I used a nice glitter pen, gel pen, to color in the fairy wings, and I did coordinate by using orange. Around the edge, I created a faux frame using a black permanent marker. Some of the other supplies that you will need to complete this project: you will need an acrylic block. You can also use a MISTI stamping tool. Any type of adhesive will work. You will need some water and a soft cloth, lint-free cloth, to clean your stamps. All right, I believe I have all the supplies there for you, so let's get started. Okay, we're going to work in a different direction. Typically, I begin by stamping my main image onto my card, but today we're going to work from the background outward. I'll explain as I go why I chose this direction. Now, if you've watched a lot of videos, mainly Lavinia videos, you'll see that the sentiment is typically stamped last. We're going to stamp that first. Reason being is I want this to be totally dry before I start ink blending and stamping on top of it. So I want to get this part out of the way. Let me bring in my Nocturne and some scratch paper, as you can see. I'm not too concerned about this being blotchy, and I am using second and third generation here stamping. My main concern is to get the first one on here as straight as possible. I don't care if it's blotchy. I just want some interest in the background. And I'm just going to slowly work my way down, adding a little bit of the sentiment. And that's good enough. That's all I needed, was just a very light amount in the background. Let me clean off my stamp quickly. And let me remind you that all you need to clean stamps is simply water. You do not need any special product. And a lot of times the products actually will harm your stamps. So water is the safest bet. Right, being that this is such a light coating of ink, I'm not really too concerned about smudging. So what I want to do is I am going to come in with the Distress Oxide, and I'm going to edge this now using the blender brush. I'm just very gently going to go around the corners and each edge. And this is just going to be my first layer. I will add more layers as I go on if this doesn't turn out as dark as I need it. I'm not trying to be too careful here. I want smudging. I want it dark in some areas. I want it light in other areas. This adds to that vintage look. So again, just working my way around. And as you can see, there's no evenness to this at all. And that's exactly what I was looking for. I'm even going to add some darker spots in and around this topper. All right, that adds to that vintage look that I'm trying to create. I'm going to set this aside and completely let that dry. Bringing in my MISTI stampings tool, I am going to use now that piece of page from that dictionary, and I'm going to begin stamping my flowers. Now, what I absolutely love about these flowers is that you don't have to leave them straight. If you play around, you can bend that stem to make it more lifelike. Pull the flower down. I saw someone do this trick a while ago. By using one of the magnets, you can hold that bend into that stem by just pressing that magnet. See what I mean? Here it is straight. if I press that magnet in, I can actually create that curl, hold it in place until my misty door picks it up. Then I can move my magnets to where I need it. I'm going to ink up, let me try to get that in shot. I'm going to ink up the flower. I'm going to give it a nice coat of ink. And I will just press that into the dictionary page. I like to use an air hockey paddle to help me press evenly onto the page. And there, that's all I need. Perfect. I'm going to wipe that stamp off quickly. And I am going to add one more large stamp. Now this time, I'm going to bend the stem the other direction a little bit. And I want to try to connect the stems to make it look like this is a bunch of flowers that are growing together. Remember that little trick? If you need to bend it anymore, you can press the magnet onto that stem. You can actually bring in the second magnet to, as long as you don't get them too close. We all know what happens when you get them too close. You can get that positioned and then move them out of your way. All right, let me ink up this flower one more time. I'll press that into the dictionary page, using my tool to get more even press. These dictionary pages are pretty easy to stamp on because they are so thin and they're very absorbent. All right, I am not concerned that these don't match up because I'm going to be tearing this out, so it's okay. So don't let that be a concern of yours. Lastly, I'm going to add the smaller of the flower. See if I can get my magnet to hold that there for me. All right, that worked. Right, and let me ink up this last dragon pod. All right, let me rub that in. Good, that's exactly what I needed. All right, let me get that cleaned off and out of the way. All right, now again, because this paper is so thin, it's very absorbent. It doesn't take very long for this to dry. It does dry rather quickly, but you still need to be a little bit careful. I'm going to give it a very quick blast with my heat tool, but you don't need to do that. I'm doing it just for the sake of the video so that I don't make a huge mess. So hold on one second. All right, now as that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to rip. I like to rip away from me, starting on the right side. I'm sure everyone has their own preference, but I rip it as if I were tearing a checkbook. I don't even know if people use checkbooks anymore as I say that. It's kind of funny. You can see how I'm using my finger on my left hand to help guide me around the flower so that I don't get too close. Now, if by chance you did rip into that flower, don't worry about it. You can glue it back together and no one will ever know. That'll just add to the interest. All right, so I'm going to continue tearing around. Now, being that I've already made one of these, I know I don't have to go all the way down to the bottom. So I'm going to just cut it off at that point, continue to tear. Just take your time, go slowly. All right, I made it right back up to where I started. Now I want to take a look at my card topper, place this on to make sure I have enough room, and I do. I did a pretty good job cutting that out, so I feel good about what I've done. Now, it may bother some people that this doesn't match up. This stem doesn't match up with the bottom. So you can, there's a couple things you can do there. You could take just simply a black marker and dot in or draw in lines, and nobody would know the difference that that was missing. That's what I tend to do. You can take a very small paintbrush, dip it into your VersaFine Clair, and actually hand paint that on. But I find using the marker works rather well. All right, let's bring in those colored markers, the watercolor markers. And the reason I'm using the watercolor marker over another type of marker is simply because they blend a little bit easier. So I'm going to just add my first layer, which is going to be the darkest of the oranges. And as you can see, I'm just flicking. I'm flicking the color up into the flower, not being too specific, but if you look, you can see where those dark areas are of the flower. And to me, that's a guide for me for the darkest area. I can even add some around the top. Again, I'm just flicking. I'm not really coloring hard. Again, just flicking the color into the flower. One more time, flicking. Now what I'll do is I'm going to come in with the lighter color. I'm going to go right over top of the dark orange and then flick out beyond that. And that just simply helps blend the two colors together. A very simple process, a very simple way to blend. And remember, we want this to be old looking. We're not worried about it being perfect by any means. All right, now I'm going to add just a little more color to those wispy pieces that are coming off of the flower. Again, just flicking. I'm not adding a ton of color, but enough just to highlight those areas. And I am only going to use the dark marker, the darker of the two markers. You could do what you want, but this is just simply how I'm doing it. And the last one, just add some color to those areas so we get some interest. All right, and that's it. That's it for my coloring. I want to leave these areas brighter. I don't want to color that in because I feel it adds interest. Now, if you wanted to color the entire flower in, you very easily could. I'm going to come in with that gel pen that has a little bit of glitter in it, and I'm just going to add some glittery pen, and I'm just more or less scribbling on one side of the flower. I'm going to pretend that the light is coming from the right side and it's highlighting that side of the flower. Same thing here, staying just on the right side of the flower, adding some highlights. Then I'm going to just rub my finger over that, and that gets away from all those little round squiggle marks. Nobody would know that I made little circles all the way down. So if you act quick enough with this, you have time to spread that glitter just a little bit. All right, now let's make this piece look a little vintage. Going to bring back in my Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo, adding a little bit of ink, tapping off some of it. I'm going to very carefully go around just the edge, just to add some darkness. Now, if by chance a piece of this would happen to roll on you, consider yourself lucky, because it's only going to add to the vintage look. So very quickly, just adding that coloring really makes this page from the dictionary look old, like it's been around for quite some time. And look how easy this was, just adding a little color on the edge. Now, like with the topper, I'm just going to press my brush over top to cut down some of that brighter area, just again to make it look older. I don't want to press too much because I don't want to blend out any ink if it's not completely dry. But there you have it. That's the vintage piece. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to adhere this now to the card topper. You can do this any direction you want. I kind of like it on the angle, but if you wanted it straight up, very easily could do that. Any way you would like it. But I'm going to stick with this one a little bit on an angle. So to do that, I'm going to use my adhesive. I am not going to run the adhesive right to the edge because I don't want my adhesive to bleed out too much onto my card. Being that I'm working with Distress Oxide, any amount of liquid that would come out there would move some of that ink around, and I really don't want that to happen at this point. So I'm going to, here I have a couple big blobs. I'm just going to pull those into the center more so that I don't have that run out on the edge. I'm going to place it onto my card. And then starting in the center, I'm going to just rub my hand or finger outward. And I'm really happy that I'm not seeing any glue come out of the edge and that some of the edges are standing up. You can even take your finger and pull some of this back if you would like to give it that aged vintage look. And again, that's up to you. You may not want to do that. I just think it kind of adds neat dimension, and it just makes it look a little bit older by having it curled like that. All right, let me bring back in my Misty stamper, and I'm going to add our little foragers to my card. So depending on the shape that was torn is where you can place your foragers. So let me grab the girls here, and I'm going to have one looking down on the flowers and one looking up at the flowers. So I'm going to place them now where I would like them, get them situated. Hold this down and ink them up. I am going to ink just one at a time. Let's get her. I don't like to press these smaller stamps hard. I like to just use my finger because I don't want to smush the ink out. And believe me, I have done that several times. So that's why I'm a little more gentle when I'm stamping something smaller. All right, let me ink up. Sorry, this is out of shot right now, but I don't want to make you dizzy sliding things back and forth. Okay, just very gently, I'm pressing her into the paper. All right, those are good, perfect. Let me clean those off quickly. Now, I really need those to dry completely before I can color their wings. Otherwise, I am going to smear that black ink, and that's definitely not what I want to do. So I'm going to skip ahead and show you how I create the faux frame, and then we'll go back and try to color those wings in just a little bit. Now, to create that frame, I like to save these pieces from the Lavinia Stamps that we all receive. They're nice sturdy pieces. That helps guide me when I'm creating a faux frame. So scrap piece of paper, as you can see, I'm using the same one over and over. I like making these frames a lot. I lay this on top of my card, leaving a very small edge of the card sticking out for me to see. And then I just take my marker, and you can use any kind of permanent marker here, any color that you want. I'm using black because it matches. And I'm going to just run the marker along the edge of the card slowly, and it's creating a very fine line on the edge. Go slow. That's my best tip for this. Just take your time and go slow. Pressing the tip on the edge, drag slowly. Always look ahead where you're dragging the pen. All four sides will be done exactly the same way. Remember, just go slow. That's the best tip I have for creating this faux frame. This eliminates you having to add another layer of paper. A lot of times we like to add another sheet of paper behind to create a frame, but being that this card is the size that it is, I did not want to add another layer of card. So let me show you, get this out of the way. You can see, I hope, that fine line on the edge creating that frame. And when you add it to a card, let me show you it actually looks like there is a black frame around that card. All right, let me get brave here, bring in my orange glitter pen. And I'm just going to add some very fine dots. There's not a lot of space on these fairy wings to really get into coloring and adding multiple colors. So when they're this tiny, I just take my glitter pens and I just dab and dot. Let me show you up close. Hopefully you can see a little bit of a glitter there. And I'll do the same thing on this side. I like to bring my artwork to me. I don't want to drag my arm across my page and possibly smear the ink or any of the coloring that I've done. Again, just adding dots is all I'm doing here. And that's enough just to give a little bit of shimmer and shine to the wings of the fairy. Now, the last thing I have to do is adhere this to my card base. And remember, the card base is a measurement of, 4.5 inches by 6 inches when it's closed. And I'm going to get some of those big globs off of there. Adding this to the card. And there you have it. That is a very easy card to create with a lot of character and a nice vintage feel. Now you could continue to add some things to this if you wanted to spice it up a little bit. You could add some dots, some flicks of paint. That's up to you. But I wanted to keep this nice and easy for those of us that are beginners, and possibly a reminder to some of us that have been stamping for a while of a different technique. Here, let's look at the original that I had done. Pretty similar. This one I edged a little bit more. I added more of the vintage photo. I don't want to do that at this point because I'm afraid I would smear everything. But in a few hours, after I know this is completely dried, I will come back in and I will add more of the vintage photo around the edge so that I get that deeper, darker brown. I think you can see the difference here. But again, I don't want to ruin this card. I want to let this dry completely before I add that. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to comment, like, and follow our page. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.